So I want to share just a little bit about myself. I think it's important to kind of put this into context, and then we'll share the agenda and kind of what we're going to cover today. We're going to share lots of examples to hopefully kind of inspire you or things that you can take back. So that is me right before my journey at Tableau started. That is my real hair. I thought that was an appropriate way for an adult man to look. Before I started at Tableau, if you had asked me what SQL was, I would have said to what movie. Not a very technical person. I still don't know how to write a lick of SQL. I've matured a lot, I would say, my time at Tableau, both professionally and personally. This is my wife, Kelsey. Those are our 3 kids, Ellison, Marlo, and Avery. I feel like we're part of like a cool ginger club now. Like anyone that has a kid or a relative that has red hair like that, they show us pictures, so it's kind of fun. But I share these photos because if you feel like your analytical maturity or your organization's analytical maturity is more like 3 kids and a mortgage mature, or is more like guy with an afro mature, I think you're going to have things that you can take directly back to your company and to try to drive change and impact change. So before we go over the agenda, I'm going to have you guys indulge me in 2 things. So it is Avery's 6th birthday today. So I'm really looking forward to flying back home and celebrating that with her. So if you guys could, on the count of 3, I'm just going to pan with my phone and just yell, "Happy birthday, Avery." That will just like tickle her heart. So if you guys could help me out here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Avery. Awesome. You guys rock. Thank you for that. Okay, and then so 3 kids and a mortgage has taken me out of the city to the suburbs. So I have about an hour-long commute into work. This next piece has nothing to do with my presentation. I mostly just start about every meeting this way because I'm always looking for good podcasts, book, or music recommendations. We always have music on in our house, kind of feel like it adds a lot of color and context. So if you could stand up on your feet, we're going to take a few seconds, just turn to your neighbor, share with them what was the last thing you listened to, like book, podcast, musician, not your favorite thing, like literally the last thing, and then we'll come back. All right, let's start coming back. Did anyone get a suggestion that they liked, they want to share with the group? Anyone have a good suggestion they heard from a friend or a new friend? Oh, don't hang me out to dry. What did somebody share? Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's been a good playlist. Yeah. I love NPR 15-minute news for sure. Yeah, Adam Grant podcast would be a good one as well. For me, so on Sunday before I flew here, it was like a glorious, like surprisingly sunny fall day in Seattle, and so we were walking through our neighborhood, and one of our neighbors was like blasting Phil Collins. So it was, I missed again. So it was a deep cut. I recognized it was Phil Collins, but I didn't recognize it was that song. And so the whole drive down to the airport on Monday morning, I went through like 50 Phil Collins songs, like trying to find it. Because it made me feel like I was either in the beginning or end of like a great 80s adventure movie. Just added this like great context. So thank you guys for sharing that with each other and indulging me on that. I really appreciate that. Okay. So we are going to talk about the automation of a salesperson, this concept in data visualization of number decoration versus the Sales Explorer, the thought process on a lot of these Tableau examples, and then how to do what I'm going to show you. The slide deck and the notes has like a step-by-step guide, so if you don't want to like follow along after this, you can kind of zoom to the end of the slide deck, and there will be a step-by-step guide for it. We'll have questions at the end, so hang around for a little bit. We'll have time for some questions, and then the goal is to try to keep this much shorter than an hour so that you have the opportunity to go try what I'm going to show you within the time window here. We'll try to keep it somewhat brief in that regard. So if content is king, content is God. It's a quote from Gary Vaynerchuk. He's an entrepreneur I have a lot of respect for. The main reason I like Gary is that he's all about trying to build empathy with his customers, with his coworkers, with his employees. And that's the goal of this first piece, is hopefully to build a little bit of empathy for your direct sellers or your frontline folks. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are quota-carrying salespeople in here? Okay, so 3 or 4 of us. Okay, so I think it's important to provide some context around why we operate the way we do, because I know we can be very frustrating. So I want to provide a little bit of context around that. And context around just this methodology. So this thought process really started 2 years ago. Greg Do Miceli is the director of product management at Google Cloud Platform, and he did an interview with Forbes at GeekWire's Cloud Summit up in Seattle, and he said 2 things that are probably not a big surprise to those of you in this room. He said that storage is so cheap we've become digital pack rats. We just collect like an incredible amount of data, and that one of the top 2 challenges of every company he meets with is how do we figure out where the value is in all this data that we collect? How do we actually do something with all of this? That's probably why many of you are here. And that like overload of data, this like growth of it, has led to this situation I like to call when salespeople attack, or when business users attack. So what has happened in my 5.5 years at Tableau, just about every single company I've had the opportunity to work with, and we had this happen at Tableau as well, would have this scenario. Someone like me, excited business user would show up, and we would be excited about what you had given us, but it wasn't quite what we wanted. And as we tried to describe what we wanted, it basically sounded like this. It's like a unicorn. It's like, what are you talking about, man? Does that even exist? And the issue with that is it's not just one of us. It's like hundreds of us, maybe thousands of us, depending on the size of your organization. And so while you all go work on the unicorn, while you try to deliver this kind of ambiguous thing we've asked for, one of us says, hey, our leads are in this Excel file, let's go. And another one of us says, hey, no, that's in the Salesforce report I built. And then inevitably, I'll delete my friend's leads on accident, or I'll show up and communicate the wrong pipeline numbers. And I'll say the number's 4.9, and another person will say it's 6.2. And we collectively look at each other and we all say, get the data, people. And we kind of bounce off the screen, pitchfork in hand, to go blame you guys. And so a lot of the folks I've gotten to work with, those of you in this room who are supporting us, often will feel like this. Like you do all the dirty work and you get none of the credit. Can any of you relate to that? Yeah, a little bit? So one of my great passions at Tableau is to try to limit those moments for you. It is a huge bummer when you get unfair blowback for trying to do your job. And someone like me goes out and I'm trying to do my job as well, but I make a mistake. And when I get it right, I usually get all the glory. And when I get it wrong, I usually try to run from that situation. And so the goal of this is to provide a methodology to create a lot more collaboration and hopefully never find yourself in that place, or find yourself in that place less often. So why do we act that way? This is from Salesforce.com. It's their annual sales report on the state of sales. Did you know 66% of a seller's time is spent not selling? Isn't that wild? It's in the job description, but 66% is spent not selling. Forrester did a study that says 24% of B2B salespeople are going to be automated by 2020. Sales leaders expect AI to grow by like 155% by 2020 in regards to sales. And I think a lot of that is because like that same report said about half of buyers are frustrated with aggressive salespeople. So I think what's often going on is our targets get set, we have a very, often aggressive goals to meet, and we're just trying to go. We're just trying to find information where we can go engage. Because a lot of our time is spent not engaging with customers, even though that's the key part of our job. And that's why I think we'll go find that Excel file, or we'll try to go build that crazy Salesforce report. And I think a lot of that comes from a couple of the pitfalls I've seen in regards to data visualization in my time at Tableau. So this blog post is from Mort Steffener. There Be Dragons, data viz in the industry. He's basically talking about kind of the two big pitfalls. It's a great read. It's 6 minutes. I'd encourage you to go check it out. The two things that stuck out is he says he really wants to figure out a way to go beyond just making nicer charts. Figure out what can that really mean. And the second thing that really stood out to me is he's asking the question, where's that middle ground of a domain-specific, purposefully crafted user interface that would truly enable us to see beyond the numbers? Moritz does a great job of describing the two pitfalls. I don't think he does the greatest job of providing that piece, that middle ground. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. But the two pitfalls, the first one's number decoration. So it's like your Fitbit, right? We took 5,200 steps, we've got 2,800 to go. That's great information at a high level. It doesn't tell me where could I go walk to complete the task, where have I walked in the past, are there other people walking near me? There's no contextual things to help me go meet that goal. It's helpful, but it doesn't help me go accomplish anything. The second pitfall is, here's all the data, good luck. Let's put every chart imaginable on there. Let's give you all the filters. Let's just let you go do your thing. I'm tired of building your unicorn. So here's the unicorn, right? And as a salesperson, and what Moritz calls out is this often doesn't go well either. We'll get overwhelmed. We won't know where to focus. And so what do we do, right? Excuse me here while I take just another drink of water. So before we share, or I share the actual examples, I want to share how to actually get this adopted and how to not overcomplicate it, because I think those are more important than the actual content. You all have unique organizations, you all have unique needs. But this is a methodology that we've used and we've seen be really successful internally and with hundreds of customers we've done this with. If a KPI is worthwhile, it needs to drive action, which I know might be the biggest no-duh statement ever, like Captain Obvious, thank you, but that needs to be the case. And so when Adam Grant was talking about boundaries, right, how do you create kind of good guardrails to give your time, this next piece is how we coach customers to do that and where we've seen success. It's my job as a business person to come to you with what are the most important questions I need answered daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. It's your job to tell me, do we even have data to support answering those questions? And if we do, great, then let's start working out content. If we don't, then how can we collect more of that data to help support us? Hopefully those questions I want answers to have direct revenue impact if I'm a seller. And if they don't, hold me accountable to going and rethinking my questions. The next piece of how do you not overcomplicate it, because Tableau is so fun. Everything I'm going to show you, I have built myself with the exception of one dashboard. I'm a comm major from a party school. I don't know how to code or script, and it's so fun. You drop into the flow of analytics and you just go. And so how do you not end up having everything be the sales explorer? So keep everything focused on driving action to impact the KPI. And then just don't let other actions bleed into the dashboard. So the second you feel like you're starting to maybe add too much context or starting to solve a different problem, stop and create a new dashboard. Because ultimately what I need as a salesperson is a list. I just need a list, okay? And so these examples are gonna help you mitigate two things. As a leader in my company and as a salesperson, I don't ever wanna have to say these two things in a meeting. I don't ever wanna have to say, I don't know. I don't know why my forecast went up. I don't know why we closed that deal. I don't know why that marketing campaign's doing well. I don't know how many more leads we need to call to make that marketing campaign a success. I also never want to have to say, I don't know where to deploy my resources. I don't know how to cut this territory. I don't know how to encourage this team or what to have them focus on. So everything I'm going to show you is to try to give that high-level context of, okay, what is going on, and then making it really easy to understand where to deploy your resources to help your people be really effective. Okay. So this is an example of a purpose-built application at Tableau. The reason I call these purpose-built applications is that if you were to drop someone here into Tableau Conference that had no context for like dashboards, I don't think they would say they were looking at dashboards in all of these presentations from our customers. I think they would say they were more looking at applications. Like the folks who speak here, it's more to try to solve like a specific problem. It's not just like an information dump. And so that's really the approach that we try to take. So I'm gonna walk you through this workflow. So we call this our next step call, task, and activity workflow. This is to try to help us mitigate a huge risk and pain point for our CTO and our VP of sales, and I think many of their peers would share the same thing. A salesperson to call one person often has to navigate between 4, 5, 6 different applications, which means you have to train them on 4, 5, 6 applications, which means you have to teach them how to make Salesforce reports or views, how to learn different email or whatever your CRM is. You know, they have to learn how to use like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So there's just all this risk for people to do it wrong. And so we wanted to imagine a world where if you're onboarding a new person, rather than needing to teach them all of these things, what if you could send them to a workflow like this? On the far right, it says opportunity owner. You just pick your name from that dropdown, and it filters all of the view to be just your information. And then any plot point you click will open Salesforce from within the dashboard so that you're just dropped into the flow of productivity. So what this dashboard is looking at is how many opportunities do we have with the next step? So at Tableau, we're constantly thinking through what are we doing to try to engage customers, help them solve problems, and what needs to happen next in order to continue the momentum in that opportunity. So the green box on the left is the total number of opportunities that have a next step this week, and then the dollar amount is blurred out for how much money we have associated with this week. And then each colored box is a day of the week, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You can see how many opportunities we have associated on each day and how much revenue is connected to it. If I were to click any of those days, it filters the list down to just the opportunities in that day. And then I have the opportunity name, the problem to address, which is what are we hoping to help the customer with, what the next step is, and then the dollar amount. So it's a really easy way for my team and for me to understand what do we have to do this week, filter it down even to a specific day, and then drive a really robust conversation on what we need to do to help those customers that we're working with on those days. Obviously, Tony Stark is not a customer of Tableau. Although I wish he was and that he would buy all of the Tableau. But we don't want to, URL actions are great. If you're using URL actions, continue to do that, but we didn't want to bounce people out of Tableau and into another application. We want to try to keep them in a workflow. So once you've called through those open opportunities, you're done with your next steps. You click the next thumbnail up there, which is just a Tableau sheet. So your lead follow-up workflow. You pick your name from a drop-down, or if you have a saved view, it just already goes to your name. And these are all the people that you have to call. So you select one of those people. You can filter their status of like at Tableau, we use like primed, which means you did something where we want to engage you right away. Open means you did something that maybe doesn't require immediate engagement. Qualifying means you're like, we're working with you. Excuse me, and remarket means you're not interested right now, so we're going to let our marketing team kind of handle that engagement. You select anyone from that list, and it just opens up Salesforce, and you're able to engage them. A question that came up a lot, the first session I did is, do we embed Tableau in Salesforce? Yes, we do. So if you were to scroll a little bit down below the fold for Leslie Knope, it would be probably everything about Joe Biden. She's a character from Parks and Rec, which is a fantastic television show, and she's obsessed with Joe Biden, which is hilarious. But we would have a Tableau visualization that would have basically everything you've done on the website. So the big thing that we ask ourselves is, okay, great. If you want to add context in Salesforce for someone, that's perfect. It's going to help you be much more informed. How do you know to call that person? That's why we take this approach, is that we want to shave like 30 seconds off of your process of finding that person to engage them. Because those 30 seconds every time you do is just going to add up to a massive win from a time savings perspective. So once you've called through your leads, we have an activity review. Excuse me. So those colored boxes are all of the various activities a salesperson can do at Tableau. So like a discovery call, a demonstration, an email, a LinkedIn in-mail. If I select any of those activities, those green and yellow boxes are the actual accounts that we've engaged with. So in this scenario, I've selected demo. So we've done 7 demos this week. It filters down to what companies have we done the demo with. and it filters the list down to all of the people that we've done a demo with. If I select any person, it will open up the notes in Salesforce around what the demo was about, any context we picked up from the customer, so that we can do a better job of engaging our customers to help them solve problems faster. So we use this as a way to make sure we're not letting things fall through the cracks. So much time is spent not selling, and so we want to make sure we're making it really easy to go find good conversations and go back and re-engage. So in the interest of making sure we're not overcomplicating things, we also have other kind of use cases of that same methodology. So we call this more of our sales cockpit. The top are more proactive activities. The bottom are more reflective activities. This particular dashboard looks at all live conversations for my team. So I can select any of those boxes are the people's names on my team. It'll filter the list down, and then I can open up the notes. This is really helpful for new people that are ramping to coach them toward what success looks like, what good looks like. We have some really excellent salespeople at Tableau that take really great notes because they're having really rich conversations. And so we subscribe new hires to a saved view of this called Great Discovery Callers. And it's like the 10 best people at Tableau. And they get an email sent to them every day so they can go review the notes those people are taking and see how do they measure up and how do they compare. So it's a way for us to try to reinforce good behavior and also make sure we're capitalizing on opportunities as they arise. We also do it for things like Tableau Conference. So to try to continue to make sure we're, if we have a new use case for something, hey, let's not muddy the waters by like throwing a Tableau Conference dashboard into that initial workflow. Let's create a new workflow. Excuse me. So this dashboard, Aaron can select his name, select an account, see how many people from that account attended the last 3 Tableau conferences. When he selects a particular account, it filters the attendee detail below down to just those people. It's really important because as Aaron is calling, he wants to be able to reference multiple people who have attended in the past. It's going to really help build the conversation to understand who else should go and what's going to benefit them. All right, so it's important to contrast that with our world when I started at Tableau. It was this. It was this. I had this classic moment as a new seller at Tableau. I had made a new lead view for a campaign we were running. Went to my boss, and I was like, Terry, I got no leads. What are you going to do for me? I was like feeling really confident. She was like, okay, well, let's look at your lead view. Opened it up, and she was like, did you know that your last name has 2 T's in it? I was like, yes, I did know that. She was like, well, you entered 1 T in your last name for your name. So I'd saved this report, done all this work, and just because of a typo, I had left the second T off of Murfit. No leads were showing up. And it was only because I was confident enough to go complain basically to my manager that I even realized that. So you think about like the risk that you may not even know is there for your sales team to go capitalize on a marketing campaign or opportunities or leads, the risk to your CTO who just made like maybe a multi-million-dollar investment in Salesforce, and we're trying our best to do what we want to do, but you can help us by guiding our workflow by like let us pick our name from a drop-down rather than even typing it in. Right, just little things like that. So I want to run through one more example of this just to hopefully really hammer this home. This is our Who's Hot dashboard, or as you probably know it, how the heck does my sales rep call me so fast? So this looks at all of our website activity. So the goal here is pick a time frame that matters to you. So in this case, this week, we can go all the way out for multiple years down to like the last 3 hours, and it will filter the view down, okay? You select your name. You select an account, it filters the list of leads down so you can see who from that account has engaged in that time frame. You select their name, it opens up Salesforce and you engage. Super helpful to have that context around, hey, there's at this particular company, there's 5 people who have engaged this week. Hopefully there's maybe a project or something going on. Okay, so let's go through how the sausage is made. I'm going to actually share how to do what we're describing here. Hopefully this will be not as disgusting as the sausage making process. Okay, so, let's see here. All right. So this is an example of a data source we use at Tableau to track VC funding, so venture capital funding. Before I kind of jump into this, if you look at where it says data, it says VC funding, that little Tableau icon means that this is a published data source. That means we passed the connection for this data source through Tableau Data Server. If there's one thing I could encourage you to do with the rest of your time at TC or going back and reflecting is learn about Tableau Data Server. It's a way to apply governed data discovery and just governed data in general in Tableau. We apply machine learning at the data source level to learn what your people are using and serve recommended data connections to you when you go to connect to data so that people aren't duplicating efforts by doing the same table join that somebody else did. It is the feature that has taken the adoption of Tableau and turned it from something that's struggling to something that is just dominating in the customers we work with. Because it lets you know, is this data source certified? Can we actually use it? Can we make sound decisions off of it? And it is a very key thing to the success of Tableau. So go learn about it. It's really simple to use. Once you've connected to data from any data source, just right-click, select Publish to Server, and it'll pass the connection through, and it's extremely helpful. So this example is looking at just companies who've received venture capital funding. Somebody's chosen to invest in them. You can see it's a list where it's got the funded company, the date the funding was received, the city. We have a pretty robust tooltip where it has their CEO, their email address, what stage it was, and some information about that particular company. All of this is driven from the tooltip, so it's all dynamic from things that we've just added to the tooltip. The big thing to remember if you're wanting to use URL actions is just drop things on the detail pane. So the detail pane here of the marks card. So this one's pretty full because we're trying to make a pretty robust tooltip. But if I wanted to add something additional to this, like maybe who is the lead investor, I just drag it onto detail. It'll add this to the viz. You can see that now that's there, and we're going to use this to actually create a new URL action here in a moment. So once I have my, essentially my list, I can go to the dashboard. This is another thing we do at Tableau. We try to make it really clear what question we want you to answer with the title of the dashboard. So when we first started, we would do things like account analysis, right? Which is like, okay, cool. You want me to analyze my account? Like, what do you want me to do with that? So we try to prompt people into action with even how we title things. So have any of your accounts in your territory recently gotten venture funding? This can be a great reason to reach out. If you're unsure what metrics they're likely tracking, visit the 2 links below before calling. Tooltips will open Salesforce or an email to their CEO. And those 2 links are from a very prestigious venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz. It goes through the 16 metrics that they track. So one of the things that really stops salespeople from being productive is just worrying about what am I going to say? How can I actually create a conversation that you want to have with me? And so we provide resources like that to help make it really easy to say, okay, well, most startups are really concerned about customer acquisition cost. So maybe that's a good reason to reach out. So once we're in the dashboard, we go to the objects pane, and we just drag a web object out into the dashboard. You can hard code a URL, or you can make it dynamic by selecting this caret and choosing sheet name. All that means is it's going to load the URL in the web page there. All of these actions, you can see this one is kind of my personal favorite. So this attribute website is dynamic, and this long URL is to Salesforce. So we did an empty search in Salesforce. So we just clicked the search bar with nothing in it, generates a URL. We copy and pasted that into the URL action, and then added the dynamic web address. So there's nothing in this data source to connect to Salesforce. There's no IDs. So everything I was showing you before, it's primarily driven off of contact IDs, opportunity IDs, account IDs in Salesforce. And we just dynamically attach those to the end of the Salesforce URL. In this case, there's nothing attaching this data source to Salesforce at all. So we're basically telling Tableau, query Salesforce for me automatically by searching for this URL. So it's really simple for somebody to click an account, and it'll just open Salesforce for them and see whether or not they're a customer. We also manipulate things like Google. So Google search equals the funded company plus funding. So if I wanted to learn more about Allbirds, great shoe company, and I selected Google funding information, it'll just open that up here from within the dashboard. this out of the way to get some additional real estate there. If I wanted to maybe change this, so if I wanted to instead make this the investor rather than the company, because we added investors on here, I can just swap that out. And if I go back to Allbirds and I look up Google funding information, it looks for Fidelity Management instead. So that's as simple as it is, right? You just swap it out in that way. We also can generate emails. So if I had my email open and I selected that, if the CEO's email address is in there, it'll actually just open up an email with whatever subject line you guys have hard-coded in there. You can make it dynamic to respond to the data. And you can even put something in the body to just help people like immediately drop into the flow of engaging. And then we also will add contextual stuff, like look up the industry in Harvard Business Review. So if you want to sound really good, really smart, or be able to engage, this looks at, okay, footwear, HBR, and then we have a Harvard Business Review article right here to start reading and learning more about the footwear industry. So it's all about trying to shave 30 seconds off of everything a seller does. That's really the goal here. And so we try to make those tooltips really robust and let you filter down to like maybe just your territory, and it'll just continually regenerate the list, so it's information that you really care about. And then this cockpit view, I wanted to share this. That was some of the feedback we got from before was like they wanted to kind of see how this worked. So this is up on my Tableau public page. So if you want to go download this, you're welcome to go do it. These are dashboards actually from a partner of Tableau's called Light Analytics. If any of you are working with marketing data like Facebook, Instagram, Google AdWords, and you're wanting to put that into like one table, which can be very difficult to do, they have a really cool solution called Channel Mix that helps facilitate that. And the goal here, like if you went into like your Tableau server instance, like just if you're being honest with yourself, like how easy is it to know where to go? Like there's probably lots of dashboards in there. Even if you're using projects really well, it can be hard to know kind of where to focus. So we're trying to apply like content governance here. So if I select conversion summary, it just loads the dashboard down here, and it's fully interactive, and you can basically go through that workflow of just selecting these thumbnails, which are Tableau sheets. So you're welcome to download this after and kind of play around with how this works. But I want to take you through actually how to do what we just described. So that kind of cockpit feel, all you do is you go grab the links from server, put them in an Excel sheet, and then we add in like the name of the dashboard as like the function, the descriptions, what we're going to put on the tooltip. Then we go save PNG images of all the dashboards. You can just use like a clipping tool, and then give them the same name as the function. Once you go back to desktop, the marks card is really dynamic. You can change the marks card so it'll be a different viz type. So change it to shape, and then drop function onto shape. And then you can go select those shapes. So if we go back here, once you have these available, save them into the shapes repository in Tableau. So if you look at the file destination, it goes documents, my Tableau repository, shapes, and then you name the new folder, and then you just save them in there. So then when you go open up the shapes section of Tableau, if you reload the shapes, that new folder will show up, and you can assign those images or custom shapes. So once you're in Tableau Desktop, drop function onto shape, assign the images correctly, make sure URL is on detail. You can customize the tooltip to your liking. Use a layout container on the dashboard and just drop each of them into that layout container, and then use distribute evenly. Distribute evenly is like my favorite feature when it comes to dashboards, I think. Makes things look really clean and nice. So it's just in a little caret, which is like an upside down triangle on the upper right side. If you select that, distribute evenly is just in that drop down. Drag the web object out into the view like we saw me do just a moment ago. Grab that URL action. In this case, we can just drop URL in there. We don't have to add like an additional web address because the URL is in the data source. So this is great because if we change the data source, or excuse me, if we change the URL or we add a new one, it'll just show up in the data set rather than like hard coding all of these. So once that function is done, then select one of the thumbnails, and that dashboard is going to be the one that they open on, right? So whatever one you publish this up to Tableau server and it is open on, that's where they're going to start their journey. And if you don't select something first, it will usually give them a blank screen or a login screen. So just make sure that you do that action. If they're already logged into Tableau Server, which obviously they are, if they're able to access this, it'll just already load for them. Same goes for Salesforce. I usually go 1650 by 2000 in terms of formatting. We have big dual monitors at Tableau, and I want to give a lot of real estate to scroll through Salesforce, because I'm almost wanting to make it feel more like you're in Salesforce than you're in Tableau. And then from a formatting perspective, I always pick my own color, and I just go to whatever application I'm embedding and then make that the color. So we'll get feedback from new hires all the time where they just think this is like a Salesforce add-on. They don't even know they're in Tableau. Once the dashboard loads, publish and promote. So this next piece I think is even more important than all the content, right? How are you actually going to drive adoption with this? How are you going to get feedback and make sure that this actually gets used? So the little ellipses next to any dashboard that you own, you can select who has seen this view. And it generates a list of all the users in Tableau Server who have actually logged in and looked at this, and how many times have they done it. So we use this at Tableau to just drive conversations. We'll reach out to people on Slack and be like, hey, what do you think of this dashboard? I saw that you're checking it out. And we'll use that as a way to just keep that conversation going. Because I know you guys can oftentimes be in the dark of like, you publish something and it's like, okay, I hope this works. That's a way to really understand who's actually following through. The other piece is using comments. So if you hit the @ symbol and then start typing a name, any user and server will pop up. You can type in a message to them and take a snapshot of the view as it's filtered, and it'll send them an email of your comment with that snapshot, and when they select it, it will bring them to the filtered view. So if you're trying to coach people on how to use it, filter it down to something you think they'll care about, at them, leave a comment, and then it's kind of like a running commentary down the right pane around what they're doing with the dashboard or what they're doing with that insight. Because if an insight or if a KPI doesn't matter unless it drives action, we want to make sure that we're facilitating that through this process. Okay, so let's take a deeper look at an example. And the reason I love this example is I actually didn't create this one. Our marketing team created it. And you know, there's all those like cliches that marketing and sales are like Yankees fans and Red Sox fans, or like SpongeBob and Squidward, like any groups that really kind of like don't get along. And so at Tableau, it's really different. We're very collaborative. And so in the past, we may have just gotten this KPI, which is really helpful. It's showing us what % of leads related to these campaigns are contacted or not contacted. So we can see the total number of leads, and then that color distribution is who have we actually engaged and who have we not. They took us a step deeper and added in that campaign detail. So now we can see what's the distribution by campaign throughout all of those particular leads. So the length of the bar is how many leads are associated with that campaign, and the color is what's their status. And then we get a list to actually go impact that KPI. So marketing doesn't have to say, hey, sales, will you please call your leads? They've given us an application to actually go do it. And this helps us avoid that like crazy train cycle of like sales saying the leads are bad and marketing saying, well, how do you know the leads are bad? You never call them. We don't call them because they're bad. You know, and around and around you go, right? And so how we use this is we select a campaign, but we even select a status within a campaign, like people who have registered for dirty data is costing you. We can select not contacted, and that generates a new curated list for us. So when marketing's trying to reap ROI from a campaign, they can really help us focus on the low-hanging fruit. And that really empowers us as sellers to feel confident to go have a conversation with them. Some of the other dashboards they'll actually add in links to like how to message this campaign. They're super helpful in just trying to provide that additional context to make us feel ready to go and engage our customers. And again, it's important to look at how would I have done this before, even at Tableau. I would have opened up a report, tried to figure out what the heck did they name that campaign. I would have then given up. I would have then looked for an Excel document. I would have then probably done something wrong and said, well, it was a list from marketing. And you guys would have gotten blame. Or it was a list from sales ops. And I probably would have wasted a lot of time trying to build my own report. I have, there's been moments where I've gone through And I've actually built the report. I've taken maybe 30, 40 minutes to actually figure out what was the campaign name, when did it start, what other attributes do I need to add in to make sure the list will actually generate leads. And then I complete the task, and I have like 3 leads. So I just spent 40 minutes, and I have 3 people to engage. And then 2 of them have a wrong phone number, and the other one has no email address. And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me, right? And so those are the things that will drive that like bad behavior, right? Because we're wanting to engage, we're wanting to meet our goals. And that's where if you can let us pick our name from a drop down, mitigate that risk of us going and trying to moonlight as like forcing Salesforce to write a SQL query for us to give us a list. If you can just help us do that through Tableau, through understanding what are the most important questions we need daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, how can you create content that gives me a KPI around that and a list, it's gonna help me be just incredibly productive, incredibly productive. Okay. So, my charge to you guys, and we'll have time for questions after this. So think application first. Don't think dashboard. Again, to revisit that point, I think if you dropped yourself or someone else into this conference, they would think everyone was like coding and scripting and making applications. The cool thing is that while I was very much inspired and motivated by the extensions API debuting last year, and I saw it and I thought, wow, I could do a lot of what the extensions API is going for with our native functionality. I didn't need to code or script. As you saw, like it was all just point and click, drop down stuff, right? So think about application. How can I make it feel like, the same way that your Fitbit is really specific. You understand what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to monitor your health, track your steps, your heart rate, your sleeping patterns. It's really easy to understand how that's trying to help you. So think about that for any dashboard you create that you're going to deploy. What is the actual end goal? What's the KPI we want to drive? What's the action we want to facilitate? And how can we make it feel more like an application than just like a knowledge dump in a dashboard? Talk to us. Consistently talk to the business. I know that can be really hard because sometimes what we describe doesn't make any sense, or sometimes we just don't want to talk to you, which is dumb. So hopefully if we're thinking application, we can generate those conversations. If you would have asked me when I started at Tableau or before Tableau, like, hey Zane, are you a data person? I would have said no. When I would think data person, I would think like a big spreadsheet or like the matrix with all those numbers falling. Like that's what data people do. But if you would have asked me like, hey Zane, do you have any ideas on how we can fix a workflow? I'd be like, oh yeah, I've got like 10 ideas. And I think the reason that we often aren't as inquisitive or curious at work, and the reason we can get scared by that, like, hey, we got to find the data-driven people, is because we rarely have been given an application that empowers us to explore those ideas. And I think that's really what Tableau is. I mean, if you were to consider yourself or any of your salespeople or whoever you deploy content to at the front lines of your company, when they're watching a sporting event, when they're watching a movie or a television show, what are they doing? They're usually pulling their phone out and they're going to Wikipedia or IMDb or Google, and they're like, hey, what university did that wide receiver go to? What other films has that actress been in? They're trying to build additional context to better understand what they're going through. And we all have that naturally inquisitive capability within us, but I think the reason we don't deploy that at work is we rarely have an application that turns that on in us. And I think that Tableau can be that, both for you creating the content and for me as an end user engaging with it and being productive. And so if you try to implement this, don't think, well, hey, my salespeople aren't data-driven. They're not going to figure out how to use this. They're probably not going to figure out how to build the content I showed you. And most companies, people like me, maybe aren't going to build that, at least initially. But we want to use it. We want to use data to be more effective. And so if you engage us and make sure that we're hitting those good questions, I think you'll get the adoption that you want. And the other way to structure things to make sure that that happens is just avoid I don't know. Think about what are those big fears my VP of sales has when they go into a meeting with the CEO. What do they want to have, are they terrified about having to say I don't know to? You know, hey, I don't know what our forecast is. I don't know where we're going to meet, if we're going to meet the goal this quarter, right? CEO's going to say, okay, well, what's going on? We're like, I don't know, right? That's pretty scary. And so if you can give them the right level of visibility and then you can help them deploy resources really fast, I think that you'll start to create that shared common goal that drives adoption. The other thing is incorporate other applications. So what you see here is, we call it Sales Insight. It's a learning platform called Savo. It's in Tableau Server. So all we did is we just grabbed the URL for it and put it into this dashboard, because content can just be really hard to find. And when you think about the investments your company makes from a technology perspective, you want to make sure those investments get adopted. And we want to turn Tableau into more of an insight hub. If people are using data to be productive in their job, then any application that spits out data, well, let's try to analyze it in Tableau, and then any other applications that add context to help me be more productive, let's make it really easy to find. So huge announcements about Tableau Prep here, right, at conference during Adam's keynote. If I'm going to try to engage new customers on Tableau Prep and I don't feel all that confident in my talk track or what I'm going to say, if I select Sales Insight, it will bring me to our Learning Center. I can select Tableau Prep. I can learn about it, and then just go select another thumbnail that has my list of leads related to Tableau Prep and immediately start calling them. Where even at Tableau, like, it can sometimes be hard to find that if you don't just put it right in front of us. And so you don't have to think just about what dashboards can I deploy in front of my sales team or in front of my frontline people. Think about what other information helps them be more effective and try to consolidate that into either Tableau or some other learning platform where it's really simple to find stuff. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm the only Zane at Tableau. Pretty easy to find. Growing up, whenever we would have a substitute teacher and they would be going through the attendance chart, and they would get to me and they would say, Zane Murphy here, my friends would always go, which one? Which is always got a good laugh. My email is there. I am really passionate about this topic. I'm really passionate about helping you avoid those moments where you feel like you're doing all the dirty work and getting none of the credit. So if you have ideas you want to workshop with me, just send me an email. From a bandwidth perspective, I don't have a ton of time just with given my job to like get on the phone a bunch if you're not actually in one of the accounts my team supports. But I'm happy to workshop stuff over email, maybe have a brief conversation, and then try to figure out what resources can we deploy to help you, either from a partner or our own internal stuff. So if you have ideas around this or you want to get feedback from someone like me, I'm very willing and open to do that. This is my Tableau public profile. So I showed that to you a little bit ago. I share this because there's examples on here that have that kind of cockpit feel. There's also examples of learn Tableau in a day, or learn Tableau server in a day, or how is Tableau different. So if you don't do this already, what I would encourage you to do is create a folder in Tableau server that's just titled training. We have over 60 hours of training on our website that's free. And adoption is like it can be an uphill battle and to get people to change. Like most of what you guys are doing is really like change management. It's really hard. So you can download those, you can change the content in them if you want, and publish them into Tableau server and just subscribe new users to those Learn Tableau in a day, be it the full platform or Tableau server. That will take them to the dashboard. If they click any of those thumbnails, it will dump them out to one of our free trainings. They're usually like 5 to 7 minutes, really quick, easy things. So if you have a bunch of end users you're onboarding and you want to teach them how to like set alerts or set subscriptions or save their own view, there's little videos in there that will teach them how to do that. So if you think about trying to scale this, one of the things I constantly see when I go on site is like you guys often have so much on your plate and you have a million things you're juggling. And so then to try to go talk to people and get them to adopt this is like another thing. And so that's a really effective way to make that much easier for people to figure out. And then lots of college football on this one. When I first started at Tableau, I created this. It's called, my username is Fear the Wheat. The university I went to, Washington State University, it's out in the middle of nowhere. Go Cougs. It is surrounded by wheat fields. Our big rival is from like center city of Seattle, and so they always like hold their arms in the air and go, wheat fields. When we play them, they think that like that makes us mad. We love it. So we kind of embodied this concept of like fear the wheat. So the reason I share this is a lot of the concepts you saw here were from me playing around with the data set I cared about. So for me, like I care about college football way too much. When I started at Tableau, if you actually look at advanced statistics, Washington State had like one of the worst teams in the history of college football. And so I would analyze this stuff to be like, how badly are we going to lose this weekend? And now we're doing okay, which makes it a lot more fun. But I share this because go find a data set that you enjoy, that you care about, and learn from it. A lot of the things related to like highlighting or actions or ways to make this like really engaging, I just ported it over into Tableau in the business context from stuff that I was trying out to make cool content to share with my friends around college football. Also, if you have a bunch of end users who like football, feel free to download any of these and just publish them into Tableau Server to try to get people in there. If you can filter to any team, highlight it. So that can be another way just to get people to log into Tableau Server. Be like, hey, are you curious about how your team's scoring touchdowns in the red zone? And maybe that'll get them to log in, and then they'll go to a business dashboard or something. This doesn't really matter because this is over. Please complete the session survey from the details screen in your TC app. If you hit those 3 little lines, it has my evaluations. So I'd love to get your feedback. Share how this was. We always want to improve Tableau Conference, make this better for you. And again, thank you. I'm honestly pretty moved that this many of you wanted to come and check out my session. So thank you. You could be at any session today, and so I really appreciate you being here with me. My encouragement to you: go try this in your own environment. It's not that hard. I think we at Tableau have often done you guys a disservice when you show us a cross-tabular view, and we are like, well, you should turn this into a tree map. And you're like, why? And we're like, because show me said so. Right? And so sometimes a cross-tabular view, I often think it's exactly what we need. It's just about how do you trim the crosstab down to something that makes sense, and how do you provide a KPI that helps us understand what we're supposed to do with that crosstab, so you can kind of combine data visualization with that output list to help us drive productivity. So go try this in your own environment if you have time today. With that, I'll say thank you. We'll open it up for Q&A for a few minutes, and then I hope you have safe travels home. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm really glad I came to this session.
Yeah.
Can you speak for a little bit about
Okay. Yeah, all. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So the question was, we have a mostly field-based sales team. They are engaging primarily on mobile devices. So what do we do to drive adoption and engagement there? We are a primarily inside sales team, so the content you've seen, we could pivot it to mobile, but we haven't made that a big priority just from a bandwidth perspective. You could do what you're seeing there on mobile, and it should operate in the same way. So if you're trying to get them to enter things into Salesforce or just have that awareness, that should work. I would encourage you to reach out to a guy named Jim Webb. He works at Tableau now, but he worked at Miller Coors before coming to Tableau. They have an entirely field-based sales team, and they were able to create some really compelling content to empower their sales teams when they would walk into bars to have conversations with the store owners around what did they have on tap, how could they get more Miller Coors product in there. And really what turned it on for them was they just started having conversations around when you walk into a restaurant or a bar, what do you wish you knew about the customer to drive a really rich conversation so you can lead them, right? Because there's this concept buyers usually want to be led. You think about the amount of times I've done a Tableau evaluation I've done Tableau evaluations over 5.5 years. I've probably done 3,000 or 4,000 of them. And so while I'm not the expert in your company, I'm going to understand how to do an evaluation really effectively, right? So if you go ask your sales team, what do you need to know to guide a customer really well? And then you orchestrate the content around that, they can really lead the conversation when they're in front of a buyer because they're going to way better understand how to navigate that than that buyer is. The amount of times your sales teams have sold your product, if you compare that to the amount of times the people they're selling to have bought anything, outside of food, water, and your rent, they are the experts, even if they're brand new, because they've just thought about it more, they understand it more. So if you put yourself in that place of, what do you wish you knew in order to guide the conversation, which is usually some robust information around what does your current setup look like, what's trending in the market, and then that usually allows you to really guide the conversation, which helps a lot from a pipeline perspective.
What was that name,
Jim Webb? W-E-B-B, yeah. He works out of the Midwest. I think he might be based in Chicago. But if you look him up on LinkedIn, or if you ask your account manager to, he'll have conversations with customers all the time. It's kind of his role. So if you're curious about that, reach out to your account manager, and they should try to hopefully connect you with Jim. Yeah. So the question was, they use URL actions to just go to Salesforce and want people to use Salesforce in Salesforce, and then kind of why take that methodology when the time savings might be somewhat marginal. So my opinion is 30 seconds saved on every task over the course of a year is going to build up to just an insane amount of productivity. And so while, yeah, it isn't maybe on a one-off, really huge time savings, overall, we believe that it is. Some of the wins that we saw, my team, when we first implemented this before rolling it out to the rest of the sales team, we went from like middle of the road in terms of live conversations, demos, discovery calls, open opportunities, to being first or second in the entire business. And I think that was in large part because the productivity wins just stacked upon themselves. And we were able to create more just net new opportunities and more revenue associated with that over the course of a couple quarters. And so we've gone from rolling this out to a small team. We still haven't done like an actual formal rollout of this stuff, but we have about 35,000 views in Tableau Server now, and we have about a 200-person team, and not everyone's using it all the time. So the reason we did that, I guess the more succinct answer is, we just know our goals are aggressive, and we want to make it feel like you're dropping into the flow of productivity, not just the flow of analytics. Like I would say all of you using Tableau often feel like you get into this flow state where you're like finding new insights as you're working through Tableau. And we wanted to put the end users in a position where they felt like they were dropping into a flow state of productivity, and they weren't losing the context of who they were talking to by bouncing out to a new tab. It's still completely, that's a great way to do it. Like I would say if you are already doing URL actions, you can test this out. You just have to drop the web object in. If your organization more prefers that, that's totally fine. It's more about I would encourage you all, it's more about the mentality of like, how do I give people a purpose-built list to go be super productive, whether or not that's with Salesforce in the dashboard or not. While I'm passionate about it, because this is my session and I would love for you to do it, I more so care about the adoption of Tableau and your people's productivity. And so I would say go whichever route you think is going to lead to that. Yeah.
Just to that point about Salesforce, now I don't use it, but it seems like if I'm just consuming information, then I definitely would want to assume it for a while. But if I'm there to make updates, change records, take more actions, then okay, I might see the value of going to that other window.
Yeah.
So it's probably about what actions you really
Yeah.
expect to happen.
Yeah, so the comment was kind of, it's about what actions you expect to happen. And I agree, and to be clear, everything's fully editable when you're in that workflow. So if you have people needing to update records, they can still do that from what I showed you. I know salespeople were like notorious for being horrible at entering in information. And Salesforce is like such a rich data set. Like if you force our hand to enter information in, you like immediately start learning cool things about your customers. And so that was another thing we wanted to do. Like we saw an issue where people would use that URL action and go out to Salesforce, and then they would like get lost. And maybe the Tableau dashboard would like cache and refresh, and they would be like, oh man, come on. And then, and it's like we have the attention span that's like shorter than that of a goldfish. So it's like, and that's like an actual data point. I'm not just making that up. I read that somewhere. Yeah, so yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so the question was there pushback or resistance from sales leadership on this workflow? So where the biggest pushback was I just assumed people would understand how to use that stuff. I was like, I feel like I made a really intuitive workflow here. And if I just show it to people, they're gonna figure it out. I even loaded like the sales cockpit has a little how-to button where if you click it, it loads a video that's like 7 minutes long, takes you through how to actually use it in the dashboard. So I was like, oh man, people are gonna figure this out. And so I would just send people the link and kind of see how they would respond. And they totally didn't know what to do at first, right? They were kind of like didn't know what they were looking at. So yes, there was a little bit of that of like, what is this? Could you maybe do a better job of explaining it in the dashboard? Overall, our sales leadership just cares a lot about sales rep productivity. It's a great way to drive more revenue. It's a great way to try to reduce your customer acquisition costs, which can be like a really hard thing to get a handle on. So once I explained to them, the goal of this is to try to save time and make us more informed when we engage customers. It's still Salesforce. We're still entering everything in. We're still updating our opportunities. If anything, we're going to do it faster and more fully because it's right there. And so once I made sure that was clear, then it was like, all right, let's do this. Like, I'm totally cool with people using this. Yeah. Sure.
So my role as a commercial operations leader is I kind of have both sides of the business, and we want to learn how learning campaigns really fit together to show how they work together between our Salesforce instance and Tableau. Without that, assuming they were completely tools, you know, CRM is all Big Brother, there's no value in the rest. With the links back to Tableau, we actually had to keep it set for the
Right. Yeah, and just to piggyback on Jackie's comment there, if you couldn't hear, she was mentioning the importance of helping people understand that the CRM and the analytics function in Tableau are like, they play off of each other in a really rich way. So we do a lot of analysis on like competitors that we're seeing more of or less of, certain bin sizes to understand like how are we performing in deals that are $25,000 to $50,000 versus $50,000 to $100,000. And so once we started at Tableau, as we've gotten better at making those insights really actionable, people understand the value of following the rules in Salesforce. Because they know if I do that, it's going to add into this analysis that we can do, and it's only going to help me as a seller to better understand how to deploy my time and myself. So that's been a really cool win for us. Sorry, I think you had a, I'll get to you.
What are you doing to continue to engage your sales reps on like how to use the data?
Yeah. So the question was, how am I engaging my sales team and how to keep them up to date, continue to use them? So there's two things. We use Chatter in Salesforce, so we have that as a thing to use. So I will at them on records or accounts all the time to try to get them into Salesforce and focus on a particular record. And then I use the comments in Tableau quite frequently. So we use comments a lot on our team. It's a really simple way to just like save the view, at somebody, drops it into their inbox, they go right to it, and they're able to see what you're talking about. Because I think if people have to go through a bunch of filters, there's just like a high risk that they're not going to continually do it. So a lot of it has been that, and then just just asking for feedback, like as simple as that sounds. Like I'll just Slack some of the top, we use Slack as well. I'll just Slack some of our top users and be like, hey, I noticed you're kind of trailing off and using this, like what's going on? And that's been super helpful. So a lot of it is just the conversations that we're trying to have and making sure we're getting that feedback and adjusting things. And another big thing is like we talk a lot to marketing about like what are the line of business campaigns they're doing. Because we view marketing as like we can either step in the flow and ride it or we can fight against it. And so we try to just have an open conversation about like what is the next campaign you're doing? Okay, how can we structure our workflow and content to leverage that? And that's another way where it just helps our sales team feel like they're getting wins because they're like they have all of this kind of what marketing would call air coverage if we're like boots on the ground. So it's not super. I don't have a super sexy answer to that other than you just got to keep talking to people and iterating. A lot of the content I showed you, there was maybe 10 to 15 iterations of that, getting feedback, trimming it down, changing things before we felt like it was ready to share. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you briefly talk about how much that is pulled in the Tableau, like your opportunities to follow this that you're talking about, what the data is in Tableau, or is that other views that you're check out?
Yeah, so so how do we get the information into, yeah, so and I would recommend this for most companies that have a large, robust Salesforce instance. Tableau's native connector to Salesforce is really great if you're not using custom objects, which is often pretty rare. Like most of you are customizing Salesforce quite a bit. So we use an application called DBAMP to mirror Salesforce in SQL Server and in Snowflake. Those are our two primary databases. Matillion and Fivetran are two other companies that have booths in Data Village. If you want to go talk to them, that have a really clean offering to mirror the schema and the data in there. If you go to our dashboard starter, so if you look up like Tableau Salesforce dashboard starter, you can download it and see sample connection examples of like how did we connect the various tables, right? So Salesforce has limitations around like API calls, and you also can get charged by loading data into Salesforce. So it's not to ding Salesforce, it's just like reality of it, right? And so we try to we mirror all of the information from Salesforce in a database. We create the visualizations in Tableau. Those are kept in Tableau server, and then they are sometimes embedded in Salesforce, which helps us mitigate that risk of loading extra data into Salesforce that we can get charged for. And it also allows us to better manage the refresh schedule, so we're not getting hit with like too many API calls, or that Salesforce is like stopping us from hitting their API a bunch. So that is the primary workflow. It's all mirrored there, and then our analytics team creates certified data sources for various functions. So we have a sales opportunity data source that's all cleaned up. It has all of our calculations to understand all of our various metrics. We don't have to recreate them. We have ones for activities. We have ones for marketing campaigns. They have a little medal next to them in the server. So if you're not using certified data sources, you should use them. It's a great way to help people make sure they're using the right information. If somebody shows up to a meeting, so that VC funding dashboard, that started out as a Google sheet that I was managing before it was migrated to a certified data source. So if I were to show up in a meeting and share that, the first question would be, hey, hover over the data source. Let's see what this is connected to. And if it was a Google sheet, I would have gotten a big finger wave of, hey, this is fine to use. We're just going to keep this in the sandbox. We're never going to put this into production. So then, because we started to see enough wins from that use case, we're able to then partner with our analytics team and migrate that into something certified. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
We are trying to decide right now how much is Tableau, how much is Sales, what the decision should be there. There's a core sales team that wants everything in to put everything in Sales. Is it cost that is pretty much, what your decisions are based off of, or is it cost in terms of like speed of development?
Yeah, good question. I would say it's primarily speed to development in the reporting within Salesforce. Like Salesforce is primarily first a CRM. It is not a reporting application. It can do it, but that is not its primary function. Tableau is not a CRM. It is a reporting application. And so we primarily do it for speed in order to, it's all a time game in sales. So I think that would be the primary reason. Not getting charged helps by not loading a bunch of data in there. And that's where I think, when a CTO or someone makes a big investment in Salesforce, it makes sense to me why they're like, no, we need to load everything into there. We need to get the most out of this investment. I totally understand that. And that's where I think there's opportunities with Tableau to help them see that Tableau can actually amplify that investment and help you secure it. Because if you're able to show your sales team that the information you put in there, we can leverage it in a really unique way to make you more effective, more productive, have better conversations, they're going to use Salesforce more effectively. They're going to listen to what you want them to input, and we've seen that time and time again at Tableau and the companies we worked with. And so it's speed development. So like the conversation we'll often have with customers when they're trying to figure out whether or not this will work is we try to do simple ROI calculations, right? Like, okay, well, what does a seller sell? How much revenue does that bring into the business? If we expose this to them in Tableau, what's the subtraction problem of how much revenue we think they can generate versus the cost of their license? If it's in the black, then let's try it. If it's not, then you're probably selling something that doesn't really have a high dollar value anyway. So that's kind of the math we try to take customers through to build that narrative. To quickly answer your question, it's primarily about speed to insight, speed to development in Tableau, and then the cost piece is a nice little add-on. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Have you taken it to the next level and done something around like sales manager view or
Yeah, so the question was, have we taken it a step further to more of a sales manager view? And so the answer to that is I believe manager just needs the same information their team needs, just at a higher level of granularity, or whatever that would be, more high level than the specifics. So the way we structure most of our filters is we want to make it really easy for us to be using the same thing. So we try to make everything where it's very easy for me to roll it up as a manager to see my team of 6 and our information, and then it's really simple for them to grab their name and then see just their information. There are certain views like the Who's Hot dashboard I showed for website information where we try to, just from a performance perspective, that's a single value list that you can select your name, right? So I have a separate view for that for me where I have a multiple selection where I can select my full team. So there's some use cases like that where we will do it, But primarily, we try to think through that lens of how would Dan Miller, our EVP of Sales, use this to understand holistically what is happening in the business, and then how can we cascade that down to an individual frontline seller, and can we keep that in this same workflow? Now, like a EVP probably doesn't need the actual list. They more want the trend to understand how to deploy a resource. But that's kind of how we try to think, and we work really hard to try to keep it in one thing. That said, though, like there's completely applications and opportunities to have more of a sales manager or director, VP level view to help them. I would just say maybe have an action to a different dashboard with the list, so that if they find an insight, they can go to that list and then comment someone and say, hey, we noticed net new logos are trending down in this region. Here's a list of everybody who's engaged on the website in the last 3 to 6 months. What do you think about starting a campaign or a blitz on this list to try to get our net new logos up? Right? We want to allow you to take that KPI and at least empower someone to say, that's actually not the right list, and you're having a better conversation than like, hey, we need to get net new logos up. Go figure it out. So that's partially why we take that methodology or approach. Yeah? How often does our data refresh? Yep, that's a great question. So the question was, how often do we refresh our data? So there's certain tables that we refresh very frequently. We refresh, and very frequently for us is like 5 to 15 minutes. So like our opportunities table, we want to know what's happening in our pipeline all the time, and so we refresh that a lot. Our activities table, because it is so huge, like you have a 1,500 person sales team constantly entering information in, and you have people coming to the website and that information showing up in Salesforce. So we refresh that like every couple hours, right? And then we have other things related to like territory planning that we'll refresh like once a week, right? So that was part of like the change management exercise, is in that lead view, it's like crack to a seller to like move someone out of a stage and they disappear, right? And so we worked with our analytics team to actually bump up the refresh schedule of one of the tables that was on, like that one I showed you for primed leads. So that one refreshes like every 5 to 10 minutes, depending on our activity that day, to try to give the seller that feeling of like, I accomplished the task, they're no longer in the list. But that was also like a messaging exercise, right? Because we got that feedback. We rolled it out and they were like, I want to see it disappear. And we were like, well, just due to like limitations on refresh schedules, we can't have it instantaneously do it, but we believe this method is faster than what you're gonna do in Salesforce. And so try it for a week. If you're more productive, then hopefully you're okay with it disappearing in 5 to 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the refresh schedule, versus seeing it disappear right away in Salesforce. And so, and truth be told, like, hey, there's some people that they really care about it disappearing, and they stay in Salesforce, which I'm fine with, right? But we just had to message that and set that expectation that it will disappear, but not immediately. Yeah. Anything else?
Is your deck available to look at later?
Yeah, is my deck available to look at later? So all TC sessions will be available to be reviewed, I think, in the next couple of days, and the decks will be associated with them. Just to that point, this is our Who's Hot example. I went through like a decently detailed description of how to do that whole workflow. So at the beginning when I was referencing how to do this, if you don't want to watch me do it, or if you're trying to figure out where is it in the deck, just go to the end of the deck, and it has a pretty specific step-by-step guide to try this out. Yeah. Thank you guys. Yeah, so Phil, give me feedback. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. Also, thank you for being customers of Tableau. We really appreciate your guys' business and your focus in coming to this conference and spending time with us. We know that's a big ask, so I just always want to say thank you for that, and safe travels back home. Yeah.